So we're going to just basically make our own custom size. It's 24, width 48 first tab, 24 inches, and that's all good. That's all we need. Okay, so this is the size of your entire board. My aspect ratio is a little bit off because of the screen. And then the next step is if you go Command R, it brings up your rulers. And see how this 0 right here is up at the top corner? If you click in this little box between the two, the left and right, and just drag down to this lower left-hand corner. Is that right? Is that the lower left? Okay. And then let go. That sets my 0 point right where the laser wants it. So it's going to start cutting from there. So those are two most important things. The third thing I was mentioning is if you do any guides, and this can be a little confusing if you haven't used guides before, but you can click on the rulers and drag out a guide. And sometimes this just happens by accident. But if I have some guides that I've been using, when I'm all said and done, I want to get rid of those guides because they will also cut. So the first thing, not the first thing, then I go up under View, Guides, and just say Clear Guides. And then all those will be gone. So one more thing that is important is the layers. So the way this works in the end is when you save it out, it's really going to read your layers. So you need to name your layers something that you'll know what's going on. So I'm going to go into my layers palette right now. And it just says layer 1. And you want to change this because what happens is you cut a file and it says, all right, do you want me to cut layer 1? And you're like, oh, wait, is that layer 1 from this file or layer 1 from the last file? So here's what I always do is I put in my initials, BG, and then I tell it if this is the cut or the score layer, just so I know later. So this might be my cut layer, C-U-T, BG cut. And I might put additional information on there, but definitely label that. And then I'm going to do another second layer and double click on the title, and it'll bring up this little box, and now I'll say this is BG score. So let's say this was the only thing I was going to do. Let's do something really painfully simple here. We'll put a little circle in the center. All right, so some people actually say you should cut any inside things first and then cut the outside thing because those pieces might shift slightly or whatever. I haven't done that. It doesn't seem to be a huge problem for me. But if that's the case, you would set up another layer for just these inside details and then cut the outside last. So that basically the whole board is held in place for the longest. All the little details are all cut, and then last thing you do is cut the outer shape. I would say that's optional. If you're really into precision, I would do that. So both of these things are in my, if I grab both of these, I notice in my layers palette there's this little blue icon that you see right there that's showing me that those two items are in my cut layer. Let's say I wanted those in my score layer. This is just a quick trick. You can just push that little box up if they're selected, and now those are in the score layer. So I might say, oh, I want this to be the score, sorry, and this one to be a cut. So I'll move that down, and now you notice I've got one score and one cut. And now also I don't want this to be up here in the middle of my board because it's going to start cutting down this lower left-hand corner. So I'm going to typically move down to the corner, but don't go all the way off to the edge, because the board sometimes is a little skewed or whatever, and you might end up cutting off. Your image may end up hanging over the edge. So give yourself just a little bit of room, a little bit of bleed, shall we say. And then the other thing I like to do is if I were cutting a whole bunch of these, I would stack those up. Oh, and I'm doing, let me undo that. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing one. This is just my own methodology, but if I'm making multiples, I grab this one and I move it up and until it clicks, so because I've got my snaps on. I hold down Option to make a copy of that, and I might hold down Shift as well to make sure that it's aligned. And then once I've done that, if I go Command D, it will duplicate whatever I did last. So I made a copy that was aligned up so far. So if I go Command D, 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 I make a whole bunch of those. Now, a lot of times, you know, obviously this last one won't cut, so I'll delete that one. Now the problem here is that, like this is what I was talking about. These are basically double lines, right? So I want to get rid of some of those lines. And when it gets really complex, I've kind of developed this just little shortcut where I'll make these really thick, the outlines. Let's go 7. Let's go even bigger. Let's go 16. This is just temporary. The laser doesn't care about the color fill or the thickness of the line. It will only cut basically what you see if you go into your view and say, I want to view just the outline. That's what the laser sees, is just this. So all the other information, colors, whatever, can help you manage your file, but the laser doesn't care about that. So it helps to every once in a while just go Command Y to see what you're actually cutting. And you may find some little things that are invisible, like, for example, if I had this and it had no fill and no stroke, and I forgot about that, I don't see it, but if I go to Command Y, I'll see, oh, that's going to cut. So I better make sure that's not there. So what I was doing here, going back to Command Y, I make all these fat, and then I turn the transparency way down. Let's try 50-ish. And then what this does is I can see, maybe I can go down a lot darker, but I can see where the lines are doubled up because it's two 50% layers. And I go, oh, okay, yeah, look at that. See, I can see there's some extra lines there. The shortcut is if I just use this little hollow direct selection tool, and I select right on the bar in the middle, not on the points. And I hold down Shift and select the next one, Shift, select the next one, Shift, select the next one, and then just delete those. Now, you'll see that all the colors look more or less, right? I don't even know what's going on there. But if I pull these out, I'll see that they're, oops, they should just be like U shapes now. Now the reason I wouldn't just make a U shape is because the bottom one needs a line, right? So, and it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing lots of complex geometry. For example, I don't know if this class, but some other people had some hexagons and stuff. So I might draw my first hexagon, and instead of trying to pull out those pieces, like I said, I'm going to use my Option key and the snaps to put those two corners together. And I need another one. Let's say I'm going to do a little grid of hexagons. And Option, one more. So let's say I wanted to cut those out. But now let's say I want these, not only are these doubled up, but I want those to be folds instead. So,
quick question, what was making it click Option was? The points together?
Oh, under somewhere.
Are you just doing snap to points?
Yeah, it's a feature somewhere. I don't even know where it is, but
under view, it's like down, third, up, bottom. Snap.
Yeah, snap to point, right?
Oh, so it's the same thing. It was
Yeah.
just a keyboard.
So make sure that's on, otherwise those won't click on the same point. And it's really, you know, if you're just kind of visually lining things up and it's not snapping, you're like, oh, I'll just zoom way in and just get them really close. Those errors will extrapolate over time as you're building stuff. So it's really good to do this super accurate. All right, so let's say all these are folds on the inside and the outside is not. So, and I noticed that because I've got my little transparent trick going, I've got all these lines are doubled. So I'm just going to go through and select each one of those first and get rid of one of those. And then I'm going to go and select them again. Now this is the single version of those. And I'm going to cut those just to see. A lot of times I do this because I can't see what's happening. So I'm going to go Command Cut, Command X, make sure that I cut those. And there's some little stray points there. I'll get to those later. Go back to my layers, and this is going to be my score layer. So I will paste in front. Now I'm going to go Command F because I've got that layer. Oops, it didn't. So it actually, sorry, Command F, paste it in front of what was there already. So that's in the wrong layer, but I'm going to just grab that little point, push it up. And now these are scores, so I should be able to turn this layer off and see, okay, that's the cut layer. It's going to cut this shape. Close that. This is the score layer, and it looks like they're all individual things. And let me do one last thing, is go Command Y, and these two little extra points here I don't really need anymore, right? So I'll just get rid of those. So if you're doing any kind of little box or whatever, you got to make sure that you're aware of what's the outline edge that's going to all be cut, and all the interior stuff is scoring. So when you actually go to print this, what level of score is something that you choose when you're setting up your laser file. Right now, you're just setting up layers. Later, you'll say, I want this that perforation level, or I want it a deep score, or a light score, or whatever. All right. Yeah, I would definitely do that, because it'll score it twice and it'll be way deeper. It might even end up cutting right through. So now I want to move this. I want to make sure I got both of those layers and drag across all of that so I can get my thing somehow a better arrangement. And it kind of behooves you to not waste your material and really lay it out in a nice way so that you don't end up with wasted stuff. What I typically do is, because the scrap stuff is so hard to carry around with all these weird cutout stuff, I might, like, for example, if I were cutting these things, I rotated this, I'm going to scoot this in really tight, and I might even go, you know, like separate these guys and separate those and see if I could squeeze it in, but let's not do that right now. I'm missing one here. I'm just going to make a copy with options. Bring that back down, snap it in there. All right, so I'll do something like this and then just do a new line, like almost edge to edge. I actually don't want to go over the edge because it'll cut into the laser platform, but I'll just run it edge to edge, and I'll run it right up on top of this. And that, not as a score, I'm dragging this down into the cut layer. So once I'm all done, it'll just slice off all this mess of my board, and I'll have this nice clean sheet to carry around with me, so I don't have all these weird dangly, pokey parts. This one? Yeah, it actually would be a double line right here, but you know, every once in a while there's some areas where the reason I probably wouldn't eliminate this one is I might even do it like this, just to make sure that that cuts cleanly and then just slices off the rest. I think those are kind of the main things. So now let's say we were going to cut this. Next step I do is I want to go up and say save as. Well, first I should just save it. So let's call this, so we want an Illustrator file and we want a DXF file. So first we'll save this as my test cut. And again, put your name in there, because you'll get on those computers and everybody's got a file called test layer 1, layer 2. So you want to know where your stuff is. So again, I'll put my initials, just, or whatever you want. And I'm going to put this on my desktop just to make things easier. Save that. This one is just for editability. That's my Illustrator file. And it's thinking. Oops. Okay. So the next one I want to do is save, actually export, not even save as. And now I want to choose DXF. And this is the language that the laser cutter understands. So I got the DXF, and I'm just going to save that to my desktop as well. And now, just keep all these defaults that it comes up with and say OK. And so now, here's my file that I'm going to, usually I would just go in there and email it to my CCA email. And we'll do that later. But so that it's